welcome to Narayana IAS. My name is Abhijit, and as a part of daily news analysis, we will be discussing 5 most important articles from The Hindu and Indian Express. So let's have a quick view over the topics that we are going to discuss today. First article is from page number 8 of The Hindu Delhi edition, Analyzing Labor on Warming Planet. Recently, the International Labour Organization ILO has published a report highlighting the urgent need to climate-proof labour environments as the planet warms, identifying excessive heat, UV radiation, air pollution, and other hazards as significant risks. It emphasizes the vulnerability of workers in agriculture, construction, and informal sectors like gig employment, which are particularly susceptible to these climate-related risks. Second article is from page number 6, the services story. This article is discussing a recent Goldman Sachs report that highlights India's significant growth in services export, which have increased to nearly $340 billion, making it the third fastest globally since 2005. Despite challenges like training needs and resource constraints, the reports forecast services export to reach to $800 billion by 2030, bolstering India's external account against economic shocks. However, the outlook remains cautious with potential risk from protectionist policies abroad and domestic policies issues. To sustain growth, India is advised to pursue greater global market access and maintain a light regulatory framework to encourage innovations in fields like AI and blockchain. Next article is from page number 11, The Indian Express. DRDO successfully test missiles-assisted torpedo release system. We will be looking at technical details of a smart torpedo which is useful for anti-submarine warfare. Next article is from page number 6, The Hindu again, an animal protection bill that must be moved in June, under which we will be looking at several provisions that are related with conservation of biodiversity. Last article is from page number 7 of The Hindu, Budgets and Bills Passed with Little Deliberation. PRS has come up with a report named as Annual Review of State Laws, which is assessing functioning of state legislatures. And after all these discussions, we will be practice some prelims and mains related questions. So let's start our discussion. So the first article for today's discussion is Analyzing Labor on a Warming Planet. There is a Sanskrit peace mantra, Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukh bhag bhavet. Which means that may all be happy, may all be free from any illness or disease or any accident. May all see what is auspicious, and may no one be sufferer. This Sanskrit sloka is urging God to ensure well-being of each and every section of the society, each and every people on this globe. And how we can ensure the overall well-being of every section, or how we can ensure that no one be sufferer, everybody will be free from any illness or disease, by ensuring wellness at every stage of the life. For example, during childhood, during working age, and during old age. And one of the most important phase of our life is working age. We have to ensure the well-being of the people during working age. We have to ensure well-being of working population, right? In pursuance of that, our constitution enshrined one article, that is Article 42, which gives provision for just and humane working condition, which states that states shall make provision for securing just and humane condition, working condition, and maternity relief, right? There is also a Supreme Court case named as Occupational Health and Safety Association versus Union of India 2014 case, in which Supreme Court recognized that right to health, just and safe working environment, decent working environment is a part of Article 21, that is right to life. And that is why Supreme Court in this case itself ensured or made this provisions as a duty of employer as well as state, right? This article is also discussing about the well-being of the working age population or workforce in India specifically, right? And this article is arguing that climate change is a fact, and because of this climate change we are witnessing a lot of hazards, right? And this article is assessing the current legislative measures to ensure working just and humane working condition, and it is assessing whether these laws are sufficient enough to ensure protection of the working population in this scenario of the climate change, right? Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about the emerging hazards in this climate change, right? And it is assessing, evaluating the Indian laws on this climate hazards, and this article is also giving solutions or way forward to change the Indian laws so that we can protect, we can ensure well-being of the working age population. If we can map under GS paper 2 government policies and interventions for development in various sectors, and in GS paper 3 disaster and disaster management. Let's understand through the previous year question the importance of this topic. In 2022, UPSC asked about the labor productivity and the relationship with economic growth. So you can expect questions in future that UPSC may ask the relationship between economic productivity or the labor productivity with the climate change, right? What is the context? ILO, that is International Labour Organization, in its latest report named as Ensuring Safety and Health at Work in a Changing Climate. So there's a prelims trivia or fact that this report is published by ILO, right? So you have to remember this information as well. And is an urgent call to ensure the future of labor is climate proofed and to address the constantly evolving work environment as planet warms, right? So ILO is recognizing the climate change, and it's urging that we or the policy maker has to ensure the working condition as per the new environment or the climate change. The UN body also states that well over 1/3 of the world's population are exposed to excessive heat annually, leading to almost 23 million work-related injuries. So that is why we have to ensure the well-being of the working age at their workplace. ILO also has recognized 6 key impacts or 6 key hazards because of the climate change. One is excessive heat. Because of climate change, because of global warming, people are facing excessive heat. And not just excessive heat, people are also facing workplace air pollution because of this excessive heat, right? There's also extreme weather events such as cyclones, floods, and droughts, right? And which is also becoming a very important hazard, or the frequency of this hazard has been increased because of the climate change. There's also vector-borne diseases. The impact as well as the frequency of vector-borne diseases has increased. What are vector-borne disease? For example, parasites. Parasites are taking help of certain hosts to spread the disease, and that is called as vector-borne disease, right? There's also impact on ultraviolet radiation, and because of these excessive heat, because of these extreme events, extreme weather events, the impact of the solar ultraviolet radiation has increased. There's also impact, or there's also hazard because of agrochemicals. This agrochemicals, because of climate change, is also impacting the population, right? We have seen the hazards that is given by ILO, that ILO has said that because of climate change, these 6 hazards will be impacting most, and the frequency of these 6 hazards will be increased. Now, these hazards are impacting the working age population. What are the classes of these working age population? Firstly is agriculture workers. In India, almost 44 to 45% of workforce is involved directly or indirectly with the agriculture and allied activities. And they are the people who are highly susceptible to all the identified 6 hazards, right? Because they are in constant exposure to outdoor activities. Second class of people are construction workers. They are almost 12% of the working workforce, that is almost 70 million people in India, right? And they are facing extreme heat and solar radiation. They are also associated with the risk from the extreme weather events, and they are the people who are affected mostly by the urban heat island. What is urban heat island? Our urban areas, cities are characterized by concretization. Because of this concretization, because of the concrete structures in the urban cities, these concrete structures are showing a phenomena known as greenhouse gas effect. They are trapping heat, and because of these heat trap, they are facing heat or warming, which is significantly higher than the surrounding rural areas, and this is called as urban heat island effect, right? There is also a class of people which is known as conservancy workers in the cities, the people who are involved in the cleaning of the cities. They are also exposed to air pollution and extreme heats. They are also working in urban areas. That is why they are also facing this urban heat island effect. Other kind of people are transport, or the people or the workforce which are involved in the transport and tourism sector, right? They are also involved in significant outdoor activities, and they have limited climate control exposure, and they are vulnerable to extreme weather and heat, excessive heat, right? Next type of people are gig workers. Currently, almost 1.5% workforce is involved in gig works, and it is expected to reach to almost 4.5% by 2030. And they are the people who work without any formal workplace protection, and that is why they are more vulnerable to heat and other environmental hazards, right? So we have seen the hazards, we have seen the segment of the society, segment of the segment of the working age population workforce. Now, if we give economist perspective to this climate change and hazard, there are certain sectors which are getting affected by climate change. And firstly is agriculture, because this agriculture is more vulnerable to heat. For example, it will affect irrigation process, it will destroy crop, it can affect the productivity of the population. So it is most vulnerable to heat, and the major impact is in the developing countries, because majority of the population, majority of the workforce is involved in the informal sector, right? And this, because of this informalization of the workforce, we see neither state nor the employer and nor the employee are in the position to ensure any kind of safety measures to the workforce, right? And these challenges are most significant for the small plot owners, because they are not in the position to ensure safety measures for themselves, right? For example, farmers in Jharkhand are earning almost 4,900 rupees a year. The farmers in Odisha are earning 5,100 rupees per year, and farmer in West Bengal are earning almost 6,700 rupees per year, right? And because of this meager income, they cannot afford any kind of climate proofing or any safety measures, right? The second sector which is getting affected by climate change is MSME. Almost 21% of India's workforce is involved in the MSME sector. They are also largely informalized, and they are also vulnerable to heat hazards, right? because they lack any access to safety measures. So in this case also there is a problem to ensure, because state, employer and employee, they cannot afford, they cannot ensure the safety measures, right? Third sector is building and construction. 12% of India's workforce is involved, affected by urban heat island effect, and there's an increased risk of physical injuries because of this climate change and the hazards created by the climate change. And there's also heat issues generated because of air pollution, specifically asthma and silicosis, right? So far we have seen the hazards and the segment of the society which are getting affected by the hazards, and the sector of economy which is getting affected by all these climate change related hazards, right? So now what are the legislative measures that we have taken to ensure well-being of people or workforce at the workplace, right? And then we'll see whether these laws can be helpful in the current scenario or not. So first act is Factories Act, which is setting a standard for the working condition. This act is also defining factory, for example, 10 or more workers in the premise where manufacturing process is carried on with the aid of external power. And this case, this number gets increased to 20 in case of any absence of power, right? This Factories Act 1948 covers safety, health and welfare of the people. Second is Workmen Compensation Act 1923, which gives or which makes provision for the compensation for injuries or diseases contracted during course of employment results into death or penalty. Next is Mines Act 1952, which ensures safety and health in mines of the workers. Next is Plantation Labor Act 1951, which governs conditions in plantation. Next is Interstate Migrant Workmen Act 1979, which protects interstate migrant workers. And lastly is Building and Other Construction Workers Act 1996, which regulates employment and safety tailored for the construction sector, right? Apart from all these provisions, legislative provisions, there is an act which is known as OSH code, that is Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition Code 2020, which consolidates over 13 such laws, workplace safety legislations, and which is aiming to modernize the regulations. But this code is not fully enforced yet, right? And that is why it is creating enforcement challenges. What are the enforcement challenges of these workplace safety legislation in India? Firstly, there is a need for comprehensive coverage of the legislative provisions. Secondly, almost 85 to 90% of the workforce is involved in informal segment or informal sector. And this informal workers are outside of any legislative provisions, right? And lastly, there is an issue in smaller enterprises as well, right? They cannot ensure any climate proofing or safety measures, right? So, firstly, we will be looking at whether or not these provisions are suitable for heat hazards, and then we'll see whether these laws and provisions are helpful in the other climate hazards, right? So the Factories Act treatment of heat hazard in the workplace includes several key points and associated challenges as highlighted in the narrative. Firstly is the historical regulation. This Factory Act guidelines on the ventilation and temperature is regulating the heat at the workplace, right? And this Factories Act is giving right or it's making prerogative of the state to ensure whether these ventilation and temperature is sufficient or good for the working population or not. And these rules were established decades ago and have not updated to reflect modern standards of technological advancement. For example, Maharashtra's rules were set in 1963 and Tamil Nadu's rule were set in 1950, right? Because of these specific standards, both the mentioned states have regulations. What is wet bulb temperature? It's a measure of heat stress in case of direct sunlight. So it includes not only the temperature but also the humidity and cloud, etc., etc. There are various parameters through which we are assessing the stress of heat, right? On the shop floor with a minimum ceiling height of 1.5 meter along with a stipulation for adequate air movement of at least 30 meter per minute. These standards are meant to manage heat but not address varied intensities of labors or the modern means of cooling like air conditioning. See, this information is not important, but the point is these provisions are very old and they are not suited for the current heat scenario or heat waves or heat hazards, right? So it lacks modernization. There is an evident lack of contemporary consideration in the existing rules, such as adjustment for different levels of physical activity and modern cooling technologies like air conditioning. This is significant because although air conditioning is becoming more common in homes, it remains a substantial expense for business, particularly in developing countries like India. So there's a future predictions and the needs. The Indian government anticipate that 50% of the home will have air conditions by 2037. But there is no clear data on how businesses will adapt to the increased need for cooling, right? This suggests a pressing need to update the Factories Act to include modern cooling solutions and more nuanced regulations tailored to diverse industries and their specific production processes, right? If we compare globally, Brazil's approach to managing workplace heat is cited as an example. So you can put international examples as well, where work must stop if the wet bulb globe temperature exceeds certain thresholds based on the intensity of the work. This kind of detailed regulation could potentially serve as a model for updating India's standards, right? But there is a practical challenge and union issues. Anecdotal evidence from union activities highlights the challenges workers face in advocating for better heat management. For instance, workers at BMW assembly plant in Chennai demanded better hydration measures like lemon juice, buttermilk, and tender coconuts, which management reportedly dismissed as trivial. So there are certain practical challenges and the conflict between union people and the company owners, right? What about whether these laws are suited for other climate hazards or not? Firstly, this article has given example of mercury incident or mercury pollution at Kodaikanal, right? Because of mercury, there is a disease named as Minamata. Okay. So there is a clear need for amendments to address how business handle effluents and byproducts, particularly concerning their disposal methods that can significantly impact human health. Example which is cited by the article is in the case of Hindustan Unilever's thermometer manufacturing plant in Kodaikanal, and which became a source of mercury pollution in the region, which was closed after being found to dump mercury-faced glass waste, exposing the community to toxic chemicals linked to serious health issues, including this Minamata disease. This historical legal case, the Kodaikanal incident, led to legal action and prolonged battle for justice for the affected workers and the residents, culminating in an out-of-court settlement with the company in 2016. This case underscores the importance of corporate accountability in managing hazardous material. There's also rising occupational illness because of this climate change and hazards. This illness that we have seen, that ILO has cited data that this occupational illness has increased. And there's also legal and regulatory framework that is in the India but is not giving solution to the current climate hazards, right? Because of two various reasons. First is enforcement challenges, and second is piecemeal approach by the government. There are significant challenges in enforcing existing safety regulation. Inspectors often lack training, sensitivity, and competence required for the specialized inspection. Also, the narrative mentions both active and passive responses from the government officials concerning these issues. For example, a retired official from Tamil Nadu's Directorate of Industrial Safety and Health acknowledges that climate change complicates working conditions, but also points to effort to adopt regulation like the Buildings and Construction Workers Act to current needs. So, there is a need for updated regulations. The discussion concludes with a call for a universally accepted regulatory framework that can adequately address the multifaceted impacts of the climate change on the working environments. Such a framework would need to encompass a broad range of hazards and provide clear enforceable guidelines that ensure worker safety and health in the context of changing climate. Next article is the services story. This article is arguing that India's intangible export growth is facing risks and that warrant a nuanced response. Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about export of goods and services from India and with a special focus on growth of service sector. If we can map under GS paper 3, Indian economy and effects of liberalization on Indian economy. Previously, UPSC has asked question with respect to the growth of a particular sector. For example, in 2017, they have asked about the manufacturing sector. So, you can expect question from service sector as well. What is the context? A recent report by Goldman Sachs titled India's Rise as the Emerging Services Factory of the World has declared that India is a significant player in the global service sector, right? This report reviews India's service exports over the past 18 years, revealing a robust growth trajectory and identifying potential risks and opportunities ahead. What are the highlights of the reports? Firstly, there is a growth of service export. For example, it grew at twice the global rate to nearly $340 billion last year, making it the third fastest growth rate worldwide since 2005. There is an increase in the share of the global trade, 2% in 2005 raised to 4.6% in 2023, while its share in the goods export rose from 1% to 1.8% during the same period. There is also a fact that this service sector is a very diverse sector, right? So, including professional consulting, IT services, and financial services, service sector is more diverse. Lastly, there is an intra-sectoral growth. Notably, travel services has been the slowest growth, while professional consulting has accelerated. More on the service sector, the balance of trade management. How expansion in the services has provided a crucial buffer for India's external account balances, particularly against the shocks like high oil prices. It also helped achieving the 5 trillion economy or goal of 5 trillion economy. Goldman Sachs project the service export could reach to 800 billion by 2030, slightly below the government's ambitious target of 1 trillion for combined services and merchandise exports. It also boosts demand in the economy. How this growth is expected to spur high discretionary spending and boost real estate demand because it will give more money in the hands of the people and people will increase the demand. It will also be helpful in FDI flows. How the services sector in India was the top recipient of FDI, attracting almost $94 billion from April 2000 to March 2022, according to the DPIIT. What is the significance of service sector? Firstly, employment contribution, almost 30.7% of the India's population. Second is in economic growth. which accounts for most of the country's economic output, almost 50% of India's GDP, right? But there are certain issues. Firstly, slowdown in service sector. Second is environmental and infrastructural stress. Third is external issues like protectionist tendency. And lastly is policy uncertainty as far as service sector is concerned. For example, unpredictable domestic policy interventions such as attempts to manage IT hardware imports could significantly hurt India's service export, right? But there are certain other issues as well. For example, there is a shortage of skilled labor as far as IT management is concerned. Secondly, we are very slow in adopting technology. Although India excels in IT and software services, the other service sectors lag in adopting technology for enhanced efficiency and competitiveness. Now, what are the solutions or the recommendations given by the article? To maintain momentum, India needs a nuanced strategy which includes ease of regulation. And second is addressing domestic challenges. How? Implementing light touch regulation to foster innovation in areas like artificial intelligence, manufacturing linked services, and blockchain. Secondly, workforce training and resource management to ensure sector's sustainability. So, what is the conclusion? India's rise as service powerhouse is a testament to its strategic reforms and sectoral diversification. However, to continue this success story, a balanced approach addressing both external threats and internal capabilities are essential. Next article is DRDO successfully test missile assisted torpedo release system. What are torpedoes? Torpedoes are anti-submarine missile system or missiles. Okay. Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about a system that is supersonic missile assisted release of torpedo system recently launched by DRDO, right? If we want to map this article, we can map under prelims, current events of national and international importance, and mains GS paper 3, indigenization of technology. Previously, UPSC has asked questions with respect to defense technologies, so you can expect such type of question in future as well. What is the context? DRDO, that is Defense Research and Development Organization, tested a next generation torpedo release system aimed at bolstering Navy's anti-submarine warfare capabilities. So now we can attack submarines from the land itself, right? Okay. What about SMART system? SMART means supersonic missile assisted release of torpedo. But before that, what is supersonic? Supersonic is a speed of a particular entity between 1 to 5 Mach. 1 Mach is speed of light. The supersonic missile assisted release of torpedoes, that is a SMART system, is significant advancement developed by DRDO, and this system integrates a missile assisted delivery mechanism to deploy a lightweight torpedo, extending the reach of submarine countermeasures beyond traditional limits. What is the extended range? With the ability to target submarines up to 500 kilometers away, this SMART significantly enhances the operational capabilities of Indian Navy. There is the advanced technology integration. The system incorporates advanced technologies such as two-stage solid propulsion system, electromechanical actuator system, and precision inertial navigation system. These components ensure that the torpedo can be delivered accurately and effectively to the designated target. Launch, as far as launch platform and mechanism is concerned, it is launched from a ground mobile launcher that we have seen. We can launch from the land itself, and it employs sophisticated mechanisms such as symmetric separation, ejection, and velocity control. So it enhances the precision of torpedo missile. These features have successfully validated in the test and demonstrating the system's reliability and effectiveness. Strategically, it is important. The development of smart comes at a crucial time when presence of Chinese naval vessels in the Indian Ocean region is increasing. This system provides a strategic advantage in deterring potential underwater threats and enhancing the maritime security of the region. The project, that SMART project, it was initiated in 2018. The project aimed to create a quick reaction system that allows the Indian Navy to engage threats at standoff distances. This capability is crucial for maintaining strategic edge in the submarine warfare, allowing preemptive and reactive measures to be executed with increased safety for naval forces. Next article is an animal protection bill that must be moved in June. This article is discussing about an incident involving the killing of a community dog named as Jay by a resident of Housing Society in Mumbai, a member of Housing Society in Mumbai, that has galvanized the demand for enhancing the punishment that Indian law prescribes for animal cruelty. And this article is assessing the impact of an act that is known as Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. Right? Why this article is important? Because this article is discussing about animal protection and the prevention of cruelty to animal. Under GS paper 2, we can map government policies and intervention for the development in various policies. Previously, UPSC has asked questions directly from this act. For example, in 2014, Animal Welfare Board in India is established under the Environment Protection Act. This statement is not correct, because this Animal Welfare Board of India is established under this Prevention of Cruelty to the Animals Act, right? So you can expect such question in future as well. What is the context? There are two contexts. First is global context and second is domestic context. Countries worldwide, including Croatia, are reforming their animal cruelty law to impose stricter penalties for acts such as abandonment or abuse of pets. And secondly, in India, the killing of community dog, that is Jay, that we have discussed, has intensified calls for tougher animal cruelty laws, spawning improvements like justice for Jay and various public demonstrations. So let's discuss about Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. This act of Parliament was enacted in 1960 to prevent the infliction of unnecessary pain or suffering on animals and to amend the laws relating to the prevention of cruelty to animals. This act was designed to prevent the infliction of unnecessary pain or suffering on animal. Mind this word, unnecessary pain or suffering, right? This act also created or established the Animal Welfare Board of India under Section 4 of the Act in 1962 to oversee the welfare of animals. This act is also having provision for punishments. This act outlines punishment for those who cause unnecessary cruelty to animals and provide definition for animals and the various forms of animal cruelty as well, right? So what are the forms of cruelty and exceptions? It details what constitutes cruelty to animals, exceptions to these rules, and the conditions under which a suffering animal may be euthanized to relieve the pain. As far as scientific experimentation is concerned, it has been relieved, or there are certain relaxation given to the scientific experimentation, but along with the guidelines. So guidelines are provided for the humane treatment of the animals used in scientific experimentation. There's also provision for the regulation on animal performances. The Act includes provisions concerning the exhibition and performance of the animals, specifying the legal obligation to those who use animals for entertainment or performance, right? This statute is having a limitation. There is a limitation period of 3 months for prosecuting offenses under this act, after which there is no legal action can be initiated. but there are certain issues. Firstly, legislative inadequacy. The Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960 in India is criticized for its ineffective enforcement and outdated penalties, failing to meet the objectives of retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation, which are the primary goal of punishment. Second, specific shortcomings include most offenses are bailable and non-cognizable. The fines are antiquated and minimal, and the law often allows the fines instead of imprisonment, which undermines its deterrent effect. There's also lack of provision for reform. It does not include provisions for community services, which could help reform perpetrators of animal cruelty. Moving forward, there's also a proposed amendments, the draft PCA Amendment Bill 2022, which has not yet been tabled in Parliament. It proposes significant updates, including new fundamental freedoms for animal, increased fines, and new cognizable offenses. However, it still allows courts the discretion to impose fines instead of imprisonment for severe cruelty cases. If we see the historical perspective and the urgency of this act, the propounder of this act, the Rukmani Devi Arundale, in 1954, for a human approach to animal welfare. This article that we are discussing, it emphasizes the moral responsibility of India to lead by example in animal rights, urging the new government to prioritize the enactment of the draft bill. Last article for today's discussion is Budgets and Bills Passed with Little Deliberation. This article is discussing about a report published by PRS, which is a non-profit organization. And this PRS in its report is using 4 basic parameters to assess the performance or the functioning of several state legislative assemblies, right? Why this article is important? Because this article is assessing critically the performance of various state legislature with respect to the passing of bills. We can map under GS paper 2 functions and responsibilities of union and states. Previously, UPSC has asked questions with respect to the critical evaluation or the evaluation or assessment of the functioning of various bodies which are associated with the legislative processes, right? So you can expect such type of question in future as well. After discussing this article, this part of this discussion, you can have some further material to assess the functioning of Parliament. So what is the context? Context is that PRS, which is a non-profit organization, Legislative Research Annual Review of State Laws. So this is the name of the report, Annual Review of State Laws 2023 report, which is analyzing the performance of state legislatures in various key functions, specifically 4 functions. So what are those functions? First is budget passing without discussion. So we have seen that various part of our budget, whether it's a state legislative assembly or the parliament, various parts of the budget is being passed without any due deliberation or discussion, right? So according to this report, almost 40% of the budget of almost 18.5 lakh crore across 10 states were passed without discussion. They have given example. For example, in case of Madhya Pradesh, 85% of its budget, state budget, was passed without any discussion. Similar with the Kerala, in which 78% of the budget was not discussed before passing, right? And so on and so forth, like Jharkhand 75%, West Bengal 74% and all, right? Moving forward, Public Account Committee's performance. This is the second parameter. Public accounts committees are responsible for scrutinizing the government's account, right? And this report raised a concern over the lack of PAC activity, that is Public Accounts Committee, in certain states, with example Bihar, Delhi, Goa, Maharashtra and Odisha. Discrepancies in PSC activities between state with Tamil Nadu and Himachal Pradesh shows robust performance compared to others. So, for example, in Tamil Nadu, 95 reports were tabled and 30 sittings of PSC were noted. Similarly, with Himachal Pradesh, 75 number of reports were tabled and 37 sittings were held. But as far as Bihar is concerned, sittings were there, but there were no reports. And as far as Delhi is concerned, 5 sitting was there, but 0 reports were published or 0 reports were tabled, right? Third parameter is bill passing procedures. State legislatures indicate a trend of a quick passage of bills with minimal debate. So various bills were passed without any due deliberation or discussion. Data highlights that 44% of the bills were passed on the same or next day of introduction. So this chart shows that this blue colored bills were passed within a day. So there are various bills which were passed within a day without any discussion, and very few bills were discussed more than 5 days, right? So this is the performance of the state legislative assemblies as far as bill passing procedure is concerned. And last is ordinance promulgation. So as per the report, 84 ordinances were promulgated in 20 states covering a range of subjects including new universities, public examination, ownership of apartments. Variance in the number of ordinances promulgated by different states, with Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra leading in numbers. So for example, UP 20, Andhra Pradesh 11, Maharashtra 9. So these were the number of ordinances passed by these states. And this shows that the executive part of the government are bypassing any legislative scrutiny, right? So what is the conclusion? Conclusion is this analysis sheds lights on the functioning of the state legislature in India during 2023, revealing areas needing improvement to ensure effective governance, those 4 parameters, and public representation. Emphasis on the transparency, accountability, and robust legislative processes. Need for to uphold the democratic principles at the state level. So far, we have discussed all the important articles. Let's do some practice questions. First question is, which of the following statements are correct regarding the supersonic missile-assisted release of torpedo, that is SMART system? First statement 1 is, the SMART system is a joint venture between India and Japan. No, it's totally indigenous. So this statement is incorrect. The system employs a 2-stage solid propulsion system and is launched from a canistered platform. That is, you can initiate this or you can propel this system from the land itself. That is correct statement. So which of the following is correct? Only B, that is second part or B part. Consider the following statements about the SMART system. It is designed to enhance the anti-submarine warfare capabilities of Indian Navy. That is correct. The system is capable of targeting submarines up to 500 kilometers away. That is also correct. It has been developed by DRDO. That is also correct. So all 3 are correct state. So, but this question is asking for not correct. So answer will be D part. That is, none of the statement is not correct. Next question is, with reference to Indian economy, consider the following statements. In India, at domestic level, manufacturing accounts for the largest share of India's growth output. That is incorrect. Services is the correct sector, or services could be correct sector here. Second statement is, India's global services outflows have surpassed its share in merchandise trade to total export. That is correct statement. So B part will be the correct answer. Next question is, consider the following statements with respect to the report released by PRS Legislative Research Annual Review of State Laws 2023. The highest number of ordinances were promulgated in Uttar Pradesh. That is correct. Gujarat, Jharkhand and Punjab passed all bills on the day of introduction or the next day. That is also correct. Madhya Pradesh have passed 85% of its budget without discussion. That is also correct, because Madhya Pradesh was the state which has passed highest amount of budget without discussion. So all of the statements are correct. Next question is, consider the following statements about Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960. The National Board for Wildlife was established in 1962 under the Section 4 of the Act to oversee animal welfare. No, it's the Animal Welfare Board. This National Board for Wildlife was created under the provision of Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The Act allows for a limitation period of 12 years for prosecuting offences under this act. No, it's 3 months. So if a offense has been occurred and before 3 months, you can prosecute the person. The act includes provision for mandatory imprisonment. No, it's not mandatory. Rather, the offenses are non-cognizable as well for the acts of severe cruelty against animals. So none of the statements are correct. C part will be the correct answer. Now, mains practice question. It has been argued that often the link between labor productivity, human health, and climate change gets scant attention as the focus remains on economic and infrastructure resilience. In light of this statement, discuss the policy recommendation that could be made in India to ensure the safety of the workforce. So, in light of ILO's recommendation or the report, you can start with the introduction by linking or by creating a linkage between labor productivity, human health, and climate change, right? And in the body part, you can give some policy recommendation, and with a positive note and in a futuristic term, you can conclude this answer. So in introduction, create a linkage between labor productivity, human health, and climate change. You can also state ILO's report here and give philosophical basis using constitutional provisions and Supreme Court case like Article 42 of the Indian Constitution, right? Give policy recommendation including enhanced occupational health standards, workplace adaptation measures, health surveillance and monitoring, climate resilient infrastructure, and education and training program, etc. etc. You can add more points here. Also mention the challenges involved because you have to discuss in this answer. Then in conclusion, you have to be optimistic. Implementing these policies effectively requires robust governance, adequate funding, and active participation from various stakeholders, including government bodies, businesses, labor unions, and non-governmental organizations. By focusing on these areas, India can better protect its workforce from adverse effects of climate change while promoting sustainability and economic resilience. Through which we are concluding our discussion. If you like our initiative, please like, share, and subscribe.